This video is sponsored by Skillshare. If you're like me, you've probably thought at some point in your life that imagination is just something you either have or don't have. This is a thought that is not something that a person with true growth mindset would spend too much time on, because everything surrounding the creative process is a skill, and like everything else surrounding the creative process, it can be trained. I have this one simple exercise that I've been doing pretty much forever now. It's not something that will take you time or require any equipment. My hope is that once you understand the basic concept behind this exercise, you will always notice the opportunities when you can do this exercise, and eventually it will ratchet open your mind to possibilities that in the beginning you weren't ever going to notice. Even if you're the kind of person who doesn't believe that artistic growth requires mental training of any kind, if I can sneak in this one question into that type of a mind, I have a feeling that once the question is in there, it will keep doing the work whether you're receptive to it or not. In this video I'm also painting this piece called Moon Chalice. I'm using my brush called Two Paws, and that's the brush I'm using for every part of the painting, including the clouds. But if you want to use my free brush that's specifically made for clouds, you can find it in the link below. To understand the exercise, we need to paint a picture of a situation where this opportunity to do the exercise happens. If you're doing anything creative online, you'll get these comments all the time, but I recommend paying attention to especially when you notice these comments on someone else's creative work than yours. That comment or the sentence that this whole video is really about is this. This reminds me of. This reminds me of sentence is where someone else takes a quick look at creative work and dumps it into a big shelf in the library of their mind that has similar items in there. Now, it's pretty normal if getting a comment like this on your own work might at first annoy you. You might think that they are trying to discredit your work or even call it a mere copy of an existing thing. To be fair, this is sometimes what they're trying to do, but honestly, what good has ever come out of trying to correct someone that's wrong on the internet? Nothing. Just don't do it, guys. It might be really hard, but just try not to respond. Also, try not to respond when you see this comment on other creatives' work too. You don't know the intentions of these people, and it's like poking a hornet's nest to see if there are any bees inside. Just leave it. They might not mean anything bad by it, but you never know. Sometimes this part is hard and sometimes I fail at it, but I've never regretted walking away from these sort of conversations. Understanding this exercise might also make these situations a little less stressful for you, because you can develop empathy for the other perspective too, because you notice that you have also been there, like I have, and in some cases are again and again. And that's the empathy part. So let's just be real here. We all do it. We do it all the time because these comparisons make it easier for us to understand the world around us, and those comparisons free up a lot of brain power to do other more meaningful and more important things. I'm not going to say that a person who leaves a comment like this has a bad imagination, because I honestly don't think bad imaginations even exist. Everyone has creativity already in them. We've just spent a different amount of time listening to it or learning how to recognize that voice. What a person is really saying when they're lumping you into this sort of a big bookshelf is that they just don't have a more specific section or definition to put you in. Let's say that you've made a science fiction painting and the comment is something like, "This reminds me of Cyberpunk, the video game from CD Projekt." This is something that is bound to happen to anyone that makes science fiction art in the next few months. Even older science fiction paintings that were painted before Cyberpunk was ever announced will get these comments online. I've seen this over and over again. It can be a movie, TV show, or whatever is popular or on the mind of the general public at that time. That trend gets projected onto everything else that they see. I could make an argument here that even Cyberpunk, the game, doesn't even look like Cyberpunk, the label for dystopian science fiction aesthetic, but that's totally beside the point, and I don't want to make this any more confusing. I'm sure that somebody will comment on this thing and correct me. When you see a comment like this, especially if you're not the one who has done the piece that's being commented on, look at the reference they're making and then compare it with the work that's being commented on. Now here's the exercise. Can you spot another category that work could also be put into? Let's say you see the cyberpunk aesthetic in that piece, but there is also this vaporwave visual aesthetic combined with that cyberpunk aesthetic. Now, instead of just one bookshelf, we have just created 3. One is for cyberpunk, the second says vaporwave, and the new bookshelf should be the most interesting one of them all. It says Cyberpunk Vaporwave on the label. This new category that you just created in your head now has space for all kinds of new ideas that were previously a bit ill-fitting for either one of these 2 things. They were just a bit too big of an umbrella term to label them properly. Think of your imagination like a library. At first, it's really small because there are only a handful of books. It might have only 2 bookshelves in the beginning. One of them is for fiction and one for non-fiction. As you start growing that library, you'll find these definitions too broad for you to find what you're looking for. That's when you'll start adding more shelves that are named after the new categories and subcategories. You might even find subcategories when you really look at things with an analytical eye and realize that most things are not most things. Everyone is an individual, and when we see the artist behind the artwork, rather than just a big broad genre of things, we'll start to see our own work the same way. Now here the actual growth happens. Now, if any of my past concept art class students are listening to this, you probably think that the following example is about a specific person, but what you don't know is that this example has repeated in every course that I have taught so far. One of the bigger projects near the end of the course is students creating a set of concept images for a video game genre they have chosen. Every year, someone has presented the genre of anime action game. Now let me be very clear on the next few points. Unlike a lot of art teachers in the world, I don't have any problem with anime at all. But this is an exercise to develop a visual style. I expect students, much more importantly concept art students, to get way more specific than that. Anime is a massive umbrella term, and an art student can do way better than label something so generic. What is the plot of the game about? Does it have horror elements or cute characters? I have full faith in all of the students being able to tell the difference between something like, let's say, Ghost in the Shell or Tekken King Red. Both are anime, but both wouldn't fit in the same bookshelf, obviously. And I don't think it's unfair to press them for further details on this. Art is not just about what is being said, it's also about how it's presented, and to create that visual vocabulary in your mind, it's helpful to build a library for your imagination that has enough bookshelves for whatever you want to talk about. The way you convey the message has great impact on how your work is understood, and knowing where in that library your work is located helps you make those crazy bold creative choices that otherwise would feel like a mistake. For example, at this point you have probably noticed that this painting changed styles quite drastically in the beginning. This piece started out as a painting with more naturalistic colors, but as soon as I understood that it's supposed to be in a completely different style, I didn't feel a crushing pressure of fear when I just trashed a lot of the rules on how light and color works, because those rules don't have a place on this bookshelf. Those rules are in another part of my library, not in this part. And making this huge leap would have felt incredibly scary, or even something that would have made me quit the painting, because I didn't understand what rules I'm working with here. You might be working on a painting, and if you can locate a specific shelf for your painting that it belongs to, you'll have much easier time figuring out visual problems because you know the boundaries that you're working with. Or you might realize that for this type of a painting there wasn't a shelf before to begin with, and you're expanding your visual library simply by making things. This is also why I feel like you shouldn't rush to find your style too quickly. Defining your creativity in a box that is too small to fit everything in it will just make art less fun. Overall. Therefore, it won't help you stay motivated when you don't get to play and explore when you create art. Because I think that is a huge part of the whole growing process. If you don't find a way to love your art and enjoy the process of it, you'll just get frustrated. You can kind of like crush through training of like, let's say, hours or even 10 hours, but you will have to keep at it for like 10,000 hours before you get good at it. And to make that big journey, you will have to commit to finding the motivation and the love for what you do. So why are we so dependent on making these sort of comparisons anyway, when they're so clearly harmful for our own creativity? Like I said in any of my videos where I cover any composition tricks, what people want to fundamentally feel like when they're seeing a painting is, I'm good at looking pictures. Now this might sound silly, but you don't want to cause visual friction in understanding. We want to process everything we see as quickly as possible, and we are naturally inclined to lead our mind to the path of least resistance and friction. This helps us navigate the world and function efficiently when it comes to human evolution, but it doesn't help us appreciate the finer nuances of creative work that we see, or more importantly, that we do ourselves. And this might be a reason behind a lot of this reminds me of comments. It might not be something evil or even with bad intent. It's just something that people honestly feel like. So because this happens so quickly without us noticing, this is why in the beginning it's helpful to spot these comments and use them as triggers for this exercise first. Remember that you can do it in your head. Don't start arguing with people on how you define things, because how you define things is unique to you as well. It's easier to spot these comments everywhere, but it's much harder to catch ourselves thinking the same thought, because by design it happens so quickly, and its whole point is to happen without any mental friction. But once you've done this visual breakdown from real-life cues enough times, you might notice yourself thinking the same line when you see creative work anywhere. And that line is, this reminds me of. After you notice that thought, you simply add and to the end, and this will force your mind to see with more clarity. With enough practice, you're going to start doing this to everything you see. The painting you see me doing right now might have an aesthetic that reminds you of something you already know, but I assure you that there's a whole bunch of styles and artists and art eras that have inspired this style and me as an artist over the years. There are no right answers to this question. What matters here is how you see things. Personally, as an artist, I don't think there's a right way to look at a painting. What I hope is that I can build a doorway for the viewer to walk into their own world, not mine. This also happens to be one of the greatest marketing tools that your art can have. Engaging content is like an open-ended question. This I learned from Skillshare class called Personal Branding, Crafting Your Social Media Presence, taught by Kate Arendts. In one of my live streams, I talked about how marketing is not a separate line of work from being an artist, but it has always been, even before the internet existed, part of the profession. On Skillshare, you can find tons of classes on marketing and branding. Skillshare is a learning platform that has thousands of classes for creative people from illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. The content is for all skill levels. The good thing about having videos accessible on the phone app is that I can access the materials anywhere, so I can learn on my own schedule. The content is specifically crafted for learning, meaning there are no ads and they're always launching new premium classes, so you can follow wherever your creativity takes you. And it's less than $10 a month with annual subscription. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. I believe that you're never too good to keep learning new things, and learning itself, I found, inspires new ideas and unlocks new possibilities for your imagination. So what are the benefits of doing this anti-comparison exercise? You'll be able to break down everything you see in more detail, and as an end result, you'll see things more clearly too. This will help you appreciate the art direction in a different way in any animation you're watching or game you're playing, when you see it's more than just a mere copy of another product that's vaguely like it. You'll be able to pinpoint what makes your own art unique and why it matters. Understanding where your art stands in the greater scheme of things gives it purpose, and it's much easier to stay motivated when you value your own unique message. And like I said before, it's also much easier to speak about your creative work when you can actually define what makes it unique. This is a big part of imagination that everyone already has resting in the dark parts of their libraries that don't have names for categories yet. I know one extremely skilled artist who never publishes any of her comics because she's convinced all of her ideas are already done and present in pop culture. She has imagination, her drawing style is completely unique to her, but to this day she thinks her work exists on the same bookshelf with existing work by other creatives. This is the type of self-awareness that has to come from within. I can't convince her how valuable her art would be to others. It's hard to watch. Don't let that be you. That's why I decided to make this video. I know I can't convince everyone, but if this can make one of you take a second look at your own art and see its unique value, then all of this has been worth it. I'm Mikko and I'll see you in the next video. Go make the art only you can make.